Most people think the Amazon is saving us, a giant green lung quietly pulling carbon out of the sky. But last year, one research plane flying over the forest picked up a signal so unnatural. The pilots thought their instruments were failing. The air above the trees wasn't losing carbon dioxide. It was gaining it, as if the forest, the biggest on Earth, had taken a long breath in and then exhaled. Hard. At first, scientists blamed drought, then fire, then faulty equipment. But the readings kept returning. Same location, same signature, a pulse of carbon rising from a place that should have been absorbing it. It was as if something deep inside the Amazon had flipped a switch. And here's the part almost no one knows. Indigenous trackers in that region have a name for this phenomenon. They call it the breath of the wounded spirit. To them, the forest isn't just dying. It's reacting, communicating, trying to warn whoever is still listening. Science calls it a carbon reversal. They call it a message. Tonight, we're going into the heart of that message, into a forest that no longer behaves like a forest, into soil that releases more than it holds, and into a system so massive that if its breath truly has changed, then the future we think we understand is about to shift with it. Because the question isn't just, why is the Amazon exhaling? The real question is, what happens when the lungs of the Earth decide to breathe differently? When the measurements first came in, scientists thought the explanation would be simple. A bad fire season, an unusually dry year, some temporary disturbance that would fade once the rains returned. But the reversal didn't fade. It strengthened. The Southeast Amazon, once one of the strongest carbon absorbers on Earth, was now releasing more carbon than entire industrialized regions. That shouldn't be possible. Not for a rainforest this dense, this ancient, this alive. So the researchers went deeper. They measured the winds, the temperature, the hidden chemistry inside the leaves. They even traced how water rises from the forest floor and forms the flying rivers, those invisible streams of vapor that create rain across a whole continent. And that's where the second anomaly appeared. The flying rivers were breaking. The Amazon, which once generated its own storms, now struggled to hold enough moisture to complete its own cycle. Trees that used to drink from the sky were suddenly thirsting. The rhythms that guided this forest for millennia were cracking apart. From the scientific view, it was a feedback loop. Less rain, weaker trees, more heat, more carbon dioxide. A system collapsing under pressure. But from the view of the indigenous caretakers who watched the forest long before satellites did, this imbalance meant something else. They say a forest breathes, not just through its leaves, but through its harmony. If the rains stop answering the trees, if the winds move without purpose, if the soil begins to sour, then the forest's spirit is wounded. And a wounded spirit does not whisper. It reacts. One elder described it this way: when the balance breaks, the forest exhales what it once held. It returns the burden to the sky. Scientists hear carbon flux. He hears a warning. Both explanations describe the same phenomenon. Both are trying to name the moment a vast system crosses a line we didn't know was there. But here's the part that troubles researchers the most. Even after removing fire data, even after adjusting for drought, even after isolating every human disturbance they could, the trend didn't go away. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a season. It was a shift. Something fundamental inside the Amazon was changing its behavior. And if a forest can shift on this scale, with this force, Then we're forced to ask a question science has avoided for decades. What if ecosystems this large aren't just reacting to climate change, but actively reorganizing themselves in response to it? Not randomly, not blindly, but according to rules we haven't discovered yet. Rules that may decide whether the Amazon continues as a rainforest or transforms into something entirely different. And the data suggests that transformation has already begun in ways far more complex than anyone expected. The deeper the scientists looked, the more the Amazon began to resemble something caught in a self-reinforcing spiral. A loop, a cycle feeding on itself. It began with heat. A few degrees at first, barely noticeable, but enough to stress the leaves, to thin the roots, to make the forest just vulnerable enough for the next domino to fall. Then came the droughts. Not the ordinary ones, but the kind of droughts that break rivers, silence frogs, and turn a rainforest floor into cracking bone. Trees that had survived centuries started to lose their grip. Some didn't die right away. They lingered, half alive, unable to pull in what they needed, exhaling more carbon than they absorbed. And once the big trees faltered, the forest's entire architecture began to shift. Because in the Amazon, a giant falling is not just a fallen tree. It is the collapse of a cathedral. Light floods where darkness once lived. Heat pours into places that were always cool. Moisture escapes. Seeds fail. And in that new dryness, fire finds its opportunity. Flames in a rainforest should be rare, almost impossible. But now they thread themselves through the underbrush, like veins of molten gold, carving scars that take decades to heal, if they heal at all. From a scientific lens, this is a feedback loop. More heat, more drought, more fire, more carbon, more heat. A chain reaction so perfectly destructive, it feels engineered. But to the shamans and forest keepers, the ones who read the jungle, as if reading the veins of a living being, this loop means something different. They say the forest carries memory, not just in its DNA, but in the invisible web that connects root to root, river to river, spirit to spirit. And when the memory is disturbed, when harmony breaks, the forest doesn't simply weaken. It shifts. Some elders describe it as a reversal of intention, a moment when nature stops allowing and starts responding. Not violently, but unmistakably. One elder put it like this: when the forest becomes too dry, it dreams of another form. Not because it wishes to vanish, but because it seeks balance elsewhere. Scientists hear a metaphor, yet the satellite images tell a story, not far from his words. Parts of the Amazon are already reorganizing themselves, trading dense canopy for open grasslands, trading cloud-forming trees for heat-tolerant shrubs, trading rain for silence. As if the forest is experimenting, trying out new identities, new states of being, trying to remember what form might survive the world we're creating. So the question becomes, is the Amazon collapsing or is it transforming? Is this the death of a forest or the birth of something else? Something we may not recognize until it has already taken shape. Because every data point, every cracked riverbed, every plume of carbon rising where it shouldn't, points toward the same unsettling truth. The Amazon is no longer just reacting to the world around it. It is adjusting to it. And whatever it becomes next will not be a gentle shift. It will be a turning point. One that determines not just the fate of a rainforest, but the fate of the climate system that all of us depend on. Scientists have a name for the line a system cannot cross without becoming something else. They call it the tipping point. For the Amazon, that line sits somewhere between 20 and 25% forest loss. A threshold, a mathematical cliff, beyond which the rainforest can no longer generate enough rain to support itself. Cross it, and the Amazon doesn't simply weaken. It changes state. It shifts from rainforest to dry savanna, from a world of rivers and mist to a world of grass and heat. A transformation so vast, it would redraw the map of South America and rewrite the climate of the entire planet. But here is the part few people truly understand. Tipping points don't announce themselves. They don't come with alarms or bright red warning signs. They creep, they gather, they whisper. And by the time you realize you've crossed one, it's already too late to go back. Scientists track this threshold through rainfall data, soil moisture, forest density, and something far stranger, a phenomenon called critical slowing down, where a system's recovery from stress becomes slower and slower until one day it stops recovering altogether. And in multiple parts of the Amazon, that slowing has already begun. But the forest keepers, the shamans who watch the land, not with satellites, but with stories, they've known about this boundary for generations. They call it the edge of the breath, a moment when the forest spirit decides whether to keep its form or relinquish it. Whether to remain what it has been for millions of years, or to become something that can survive a harsher world. To them, the tipping point isn't just ecological. It is spiritual. It is the forest remembering and the forest choosing. And strangely, their legends match the science in ways no one expected. They speak of a time when the rains will no longer obey the trees, when the clouds will not gather, even as the heat rises, when the great rivers will shrink into wandering threads of mud. And when that day comes, they say the forest will change its name, becoming a land of fire and open ground. A savanna where the memory of the rainforest lives only in the soil beneath your feet. For scientists, this is a hydrological collapse, a water cycle failure. For the shamans, it is destiny. But both sides agree on one thing. Once the tipping point is crossed, the transformation is self-propelled. The new system reinforces itself. The savanna sustains the heat. The heat sustains the dryness. And the dryness prevents the trees from ever returning. The rainforest doesn't die. It becomes locked into a new identity, a new equilibrium, one that humanity is not prepared for, one that would send ripple effects through weather systems, food supplies, and ocean currents around the world. So the real question is not, will the Amazon reach the tipping point? The real question is, has it already begun? Because the indicators, the broken rains, the rising carbon, the slowing recovery, the expanding patches of open ground, all point toward a system quietly crossing a threshold we cannot yet see, but will feel for the rest of our lives. When a forest begins to change its breath, the first signs don't appear in the sky. They appear in its smallest lives. In the Amazon, life is not built from the top down. It rises from the insects, from the pollinators, from the invisible workers that keep the entire cathedral standing. And they are the first to sense when the harmony starts to break. Bees that once traced perfect circuits between flowers now abandon entire patches of forest, confused by heat, disrupted by drought, unable to find the moisture they need to survive. Without them, certain trees, the ones that depend on precise timing, precise humidity, precise pollination, simply fail to reproduce. The forest becomes quieter, not because animals are leaving, but because the smallest voices are falling silent. Butterflies lose their breeding pools. Frogs vanish when the streams retreat. Orchids wither because the insects that love them no longer rise at dawn. But then the silence grows larger. The great mammals, the tapirs, jaguars, howler monkeys, begin to move differently. Not in their usual purposeful routes, but in fractured paths, seeking shade where none remains, food where none grows, moisture that now evaporates before it touches their tongues. In parts of the southeast Amazon, researchers found something unsettling, a sudden shift in the behavior of fruit-eating monkeys. Their favorite trees had stopped fruiting, and entire troops wandered farther and farther, sometimes disappearing altogether, as if swallowed by the forest's new, harsher geometry. To science, it is a breakdown of trophic networks, the unraveling of who eats what and who depends on whom. But to the forest keepers, these absences mean something deeper. They speak of the dimming, a slow fading of the forest's inner lights. Each species a spark. Each disappearance, another ember going out in the great living tapestry. One shaman described it like this: when the insects leave, the forest loses its memory. When the animals leave, it loses its dreams. And when the giants fall, it loses its soul. And the giants, the towering Brazil nut trees, the ironwoods, the ancient kapocks, are beginning to fall. They die in ways that are almost ceremonial, slow, hollowing from the inside, as if their strength is evaporating before their bodies catch up. It can take a century to grow a giant, but only minutes for a drought, to push it past the point of return. When one collapses, it releases hundreds of years of carbon in a single moment, a breath of the past, forced back into the future. And the forest feels it, not metaphorically, but physically. Because every fallen giant changes temperature, moisture, airflow, a small shift with enormous consequence. But beneath the leaves, something even stranger is happening. The soil, normally a vault of ancient carbon, is waking up. Heat accelerates microbial life. The tiny decomposers that once worked slowly in the cool dark now burn through organic matter with frantic hunger, breathing out carbon dioxide at a rate the forest cannot counter. To science, this is soil respiration. To the shamans, it is the underbreath, the breath of the forest's shadow, released when the balance breaks. The roots feel it too. Mycorrhizal networks, the fungal threads that act like the forest's nervous system, begin to collapse. Where once they carried nutrients and signals between entire communities of trees, they now shrivel in the heat, leaving each plant to fend for itself. The forest loses its ability to think as one body. It becomes fractured, both in form and in spirit. And then something unexpected happens. The species that thrive in disturbance, rodents, mosquitoes, certain fast-breeding insects begin to surge. The forest has always had predators to keep these populations balanced. But when the predators weaken, when the canopy cools no more, when the rivers shrink, nature's checks and balances start to break. Suddenly, diseases spread more easily. Parasites find new hosts. Mosquitoes move into places once too cool or too wet for them. What appears to be an ecological decline starts to look something like an evolutionary reshuffling, a resorting of life according to harsher rules. But there's another layer beneath this, a question scientists rarely ask, but indigenous philosophies confront directly. What if the forest is not just failing to support its old inhabitants, but preparing for new ones? What if a shifting Amazon is not only a collapse, but an adaptation, a transition into a form meant for a different world, a hotter world, a drier world, a world we forced into being? Because as one elder said, The forest does not choose death. It chooses change. And the data, strangely, seems to agree. Grass species begin to colonize the newly sunlit gaps. Heat-tolerant shrubs take root where giants once stood. Open clearings expand like veins across the forest floor. It is not simply dying. It is reorganizing, rearranging, reimagining itself in real time. The question is not whether the Amazon can change. It already is. The question is, what will be lost? Before its transformation is complete, what memories will vanish when the sparks go out? What dreams will fade when the animals that carried them are no longer there? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, if the rainforest becomes something else, something with a new breath, a new rhythm, a new soul, will humanity recognize the world that emerges from it? Or will we become strangers on a planet that no longer remembers the forest we once knew? When a forest the size of the Amazon falters, the consequences do not stay within its borders. They radiate outward into the air, into the oceans, into the lives of people who may never set foot beneath its canopy. Because the Amazon is not just a forest. It is a regulator, a stabilizer, a conductor in the orchestra of global climate. And its breath, whether steady or broken, changes the rhythm of the entire planet. The first shifts appear in the rain. South America's storms depend on the flying rivers, the vapor streams the Amazon once created, with flawless reliability. But when the forest weakens, those sky rivers thin, curl, and finally dissolve. Rain that once swept across Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, now falls in the wrong places, or not at all. Reservoirs drop. Hydropower falters. Crops fail in patterns that no model predicted. It begins as local hardship and ends as global disruption. Coffee prices rise. Soy shortages ripple. Food systems shudder from pressures that started as a single broken cycle inside a distant rainforest. Then the heat arrives. Not just the heat above the trees, but the heat released when a major carbon sink becomes a carbon source. Every ton of carbon dioxide the Amazon exhales is a ton the atmosphere must carry. A burden that once had a place to go now lingers in the sky, strengthening storms, fueling droughts, warming oceans. And the oceans feel it. Warmer waters alter currents, shift monsoons, and push hurricane energies closer to their upper limits. A forest's collapse echoes across the sea, like a distant drumbeat that changes the timing of every wave. But there is another consequence, one harder to quantify and far more unsettling. Human beings are deeply tied to the patterns of nature. When forests thrive, civilizations rise in stability. When ecosystems enter chaos, societies feel it in ways science struggles to measure. Anxiety climbs. Migration increases. Conflicts ignite over land and water. Not because the forest speaks, but because the world it stabilizes begins to tilt. Some indigenous philosophies frame this differently. They say the Amazon acts as the emotional lung of the planet, a place where the earth processes imbalance, releases tension, and maintains harmony between living things. When that harmony fractures, the fractures extend into humanity. And strangely, psychologists studying climate anxiety are beginning to echo the same idea, that ecological disruption creates psychological disruption. That when the earth loses balance, so do we. But perhaps the most haunting idea is also the simplest. If the Amazon is transitioning into a new state, a state built for heat, dryness, and instability, then the world it shapes will push us into new states as well. Economic systems will need to adapt. Food systems will need to shift. Communities will need to move. And civilizations will need to rethink what stability even means. Because when a forest breathes wrong, a planet lives differently. And if the Amazon is indeed crossing a threshold, ecological, spiritual, or both, then humanity is not facing a single environmental crisis. We are facing a change in the operating system of the Earth itself, a shift in the rules that have governed life for millions of years. And the question we must now confront is not how to reverse it, but whether we are ready for the world that comes after. A world shaped by a forest that is no longer what it once was and may never be again. When we look at the Amazon from above, it's easy to see a forest, a mass of green, a shape on a map. But when you walk through it, when you hear the silence, where voices once lived, when you feel the heat, where cool breath once rose from the soil, you understand something else. The rainforest is not just losing its balance. It is making a choice about what it can no longer be and what it must become in order to survive a world that has forgotten how to listen. And maybe that's the part we struggle with the most. Because forests don't vote. Rivers don't argue. So when they change, they do not explain why. They simply shift, quietly, steadily, reshaping the future without asking our permission. But the truth is simple. When the breath of the Amazon changes, the breath of the planet changes with it. And whether we realize it or not, so do we. Some say the Earth is speaking. Others say it is warning. And a few believe that what we're witnessing is the planet beginning to reveal what lies beneath its calm surface, the deeper forces, the ancient pressures, the hidden structures we were never meant to ignore. And that brings us to a very different place. A place where humans drilled deeper into the earth than anyone had before. A hole so vast, so unnatural, it pierced into stone that had not seen light for over 2 billion years. And from that depth came a sound that terrified even the scientists who recorded it. If the Amazon teaches us how the planet breathes, and this next story shows us how the planet speaks. In the next episode of Earth's Hidden Mysteries, the deepest hole ever dug, and the terrifying sound beneath, what lies below is nothing like what lies above. And once you hear it, you may never think of the Earth the same way again.